Hey, what's up, gang? So, just want to talk first. Regionals was last weekend. Had a fantastic time for like 99% of it. My body was failing me, unfortunately, so I was sick. Still, I don't know what's wrong with it. I'm still sick to this day. I took off from work to try and get a little bit of extra recovery going. See how that goes. There are more tournaments coming up as well, so I'm planning on partaking in those, and I'm 99% sure that I will be taking the Dark Masters list with me. Now, I've debated a little bit about what I want this video to kind of be done as, either like just like a typical deck profile, or maybe like another slideshow going over each matchup and talking a little bit about it. I've decided to maybe pull back a little bit on the depth of those things, and talk, I think, overarchingly about the way the deck performed and how I performed with it personally as well. So starting off, there was an 8.5 hour VOD. I played for a very, very long time on Saturday. And unsurprisingly, my body did start giving out towards the end of it, and I ended up dropping right before the last round after my third loss. And I was like, you know what? All right, fine. We'll stop for now. But I think nonetheless, the games prior to that final round, I think were very, very well done on my part and very fun in a lot of ways. I think I made very few misplays in at least the first half of the tournament. I think my endurance is something I definitely need to work on when piloting a deck like this. When piloting Numemon in the prior tournaments that I've taken, I haven't felt as much fatigue because I've been able to kind of just focus on more linear game plans and react more appropriately to what my opponent's doing on the board, comparatively with this style of deck, which is I think in the best of terms, a control deck that tries to play into what your opponent is doing. And so the style of play changes depending on the matchup, and that can be exceptionally draining. So when I take this into future tournaments, I'm hoping that my endurance will last a little bit longer. But nonetheless, if you guys are interested in the 8.5 hour VOD, I can definitely drop it on the channel. Just, do a little editing, plop it in, and there you go. Nonetheless, continuing on the video itself, though, I will talk a little bit about the matchups I ran into, how I did, what happened, just a quick overview there, and then talk about the deck, and I'll show off the list, and then not really go into like a card by card per se, but I will talk about how I feel it's lacking in certain areas or how it's really good in other certain areas. So the deck I ended up facing the most was actually Demon Lords, which I had said prior was one of our more difficult matchups, and I think it still is in a lot of ways. It requires you to get a little bit lucky. Your Apocalypse, unless it is like really early in security, or if it is milled really early on, is almost like a mandatory find in this matchup. But because of how long the match will go on and how effectively you'll be able to stall out your opponent, it's pretty easy to, in my opinion, find it. So it was my first matchup, and we ended up tying. We went to time in game 2, and I ended up misplaying the final round because I didn't see specifically it was the thing I lost to was their option card, that whenever one of their Demon Lords is deleted, all turns they can play from underneath their gate, and they ended up playing Beelzemon for rush into swinging for game. And I had set up no blockers on the crackback because of the fact that I didn't think I needed them. So that was very hampering. And they ended up losing game 1 to the fact that I just ended up Vicomon stalling them, and they can't swing with the Agudamon from the gate, which they didn't know about until they had activated gate and attempted to swing. I was like, well, the Vicomon effect is still active. They're like, oh, right, he doesn't have sources. And so from there, I ended up outvaluing them because they were just hard dropping Demon Lords for like 13, 15 cost. Not great for them. It was a tie though, nonetheless, because of a misplay, and that's totally fine. My game 2 ended up being against Terriermon, and that was a really weird matchup. Our game 1 ended up lasting almost 35 minutes, I think. It was a really long game 1, and that was just because of the style of play that they were going for was like a very like big stack style focus, and I had to continuously remove every single thing they did until eventually they just ran out of options and ended up losing the game 1. We went into a game 2 and it was over fairly quickly. I ended up just setting up a really strong board and then killing them, I believe, if I recall correctly. The third match was against the new Volcanic deck from EX7. which is a really weird matchup. I ended up breaking pretty heftily into game 1 and having to claw my way back into the game slowly but surely. And it got to a point where they had set it up lethal on their next turn, and so I had to search for, in the bottom 10 of my deck, I had 2 security left, 10 cards left in my deck. I had a search and then a draw, and that was all that I was going to be able to get to find the Apocalypse. Because then on the crackback, they would put me to 0 security, and they wouldn't be able to kill me again. Come back to my turn, and then I would just hope and pray that I hit the Apocalypse on the final draw, and if I didn't, then I lose the game. But at any point I find the Apocalypse, they do lose because there were, I believe, on like 4 cards left in deck. So, unfortunately, I didn't find the Apocalypse on because I was never given the chance to. My opponent ends up disconnecting due to, I later find out, his nephew ends up kicking out the router by accident. And so I call a judge, let them know. The judge and I wait for, I think it's like a minute or 2 minutes before he's given a game loss, and then we wait a couple more minutes before he finally comes back. And he's given the game loss, and I feel bad about it, but like, it is what it is. Accidents happen. We go into our game 2. Game 2, I don't break, and I'm so set up very, very quickly against his deck, and he unfortunately cannot find any level 4, so he's having to I think he hard places only level 4, and then can't find any through any of his searching power, and ends up conceding after I set up lethal on the crackback, which is unfortunate, but you know, it happens. My 4th game was against Imperial. Imperial is a really interesting matchup, and I expected to be running into more Imperial than I ended up doing so. We end up in game 1, they swing into my Zor not knowing it has Retail, which ends up being fine for them because they do have Partition, but nonetheless, getting a Dragon Mode off the field was really nice. I end up taking game 1, and then I end up taking game 2 because Shoto is a really good card at slowing them down from killing me. And a lot of times if I lose a matchup like that, it's purely because I couldn't find Shoto in like the first like 3 or 4 turns, while still also not being able to set up my own stuff. Into round 5, where I actually faced my first loss against Ancient Garurumon red base, which is a really rough time. Game 1, I'm not able to actually set up anything, and they kill me because the singular time that I end up setting up a body, they run Zudomon Ace in that list, which I was very, very surprised about, and it ends up destroying me. And so they take game 1. Game 2, I claw my way back in. I'm sitting at 5 security. They have not been able to get a single check in all game. I am dominating the board currently. And then they go Heaven's Judgment. They kill 2 or 3 of my aces, and they Zudomon my other ace, stripping out the, well, they Zudomon my Omnizord, specifically stripping out the Melga ace from underneath it, bouncing it to hand, keeping turn, and having 5 checks on field, which, rough. And they had just promoted their one of Ukomon, the promo, in the back, so they were able to do that while still keeping turn. And so they actually went plus memory, I think, at the end of it, going from like 1 or 2 memory to 3 memory at the end, which is really gross. But they get all 5 checks in. I still feel pretty good though, because on the crackback I can set up a Zor, a Vikemon, making it so that way they can't swing again. Vikemon has a really interesting play in the matchup because their tamer can't suspend if they go into Kendo, so they have to do the combo while standing to get rid of the guy, which can still be like difficult for them to do. However, they do end up also having the one of Louis promoting the rookie in the back for game, which does end up taking it. Felt really bad, but it just felt like a variance loss, as well as I didn't expect to run into too much Ancient Garurumon because it feels a lot weaker post ban list. So I don't think that people are really on it as much. I think throughout the course of the tournament I saw 2, one on another person that I know stream, Tesros, and he ended up playing against a like weird hybrid version, and I played against the red base, and those are the only 2 that I ended up seeing. But nonetheless, it's fine. My next round was against Demon Lords again, and I end up winning it pretty handedly that time. I know the matchup pretty well. My opponent never fell into like the Vikemon trap of destroying their own gate with the Vikemon on field and stuff, but nonetheless, I was able to consistently make it so that way if they're ever going to try to Digivolve on field, like with like a sleep mode or something, we're safe. If they ever attempt to go from the trash, we could always just Paladin mode their guy back, and we end up winning both games before time. Actually, we had like a couple minutes left before time happened, which was rough because I had to mill them out. Both games. I milled them out both games, but it's fine. They tried to, a really funny interaction in that matchup was they tried to Barbamon my Apocalypse, my Paladins, and my Mephistomons from my hand a couple times, and I was very lucky in the fact that they couldn't, they never hit that, which, thank God, because there was a point in the game where if they did hit the Paladin mode for my hand with the Barbamon, I think I do just lose because they are able to kill me on the crackback, which would have been really sad, but... going into the round after, I think this is round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, round 6, we end up running into Dexdorugraemon, and that's was a rough one. We end up taking game 1 pretty handedly, but my opponent starts playing, I think, a lot more efficiently into my deck. And a card that has allowed me, I think, a lot of leeway in that matchup is the Shoyo, or Shodo, I mean. And I just couldn't find him in game 2 or in game 3. So my opponent was able to effectively remove my aces, keeping turn and making a lot of, I think, really effective plays. Even playing underneath Vikemon pretty consistently, still getting multiple checks in with Alliance by getting out cheap bodies and then digivolving on top of them. I think every single game my opponent was dead next turn if I had that next turn, because the way the matchup works is they're actually really good at killing themselves into Apocalypse. So again, if you ever find Apocalypse in that matchup, you're kind of just sitting and waiting because they're going to mill themselves out down to like 10 cards, down to like 8 cards, down to like 6. And so my opponent ever passes back, they do just die. But unfortunately, without the Shodo, I can't guarantee like that number of blocks I really need to stay in the game long enough, because they will just try and aggro you down. Which is why I found a Shodo game 1 in the very first check-in security, and from that moment onwards, I was completely set. But from the next 2 games, there was not a single Shodo in security, nor was there a Shodo in my hand at any given point. I think that in the game 3, there was a Shodo in the last like 2 turns, but by that point it's too difficult for us to drop a 3-cost Shodo against a deck like that, which is so memory efficient, where they're consistently putting you at 1. Also, Shodo's really good at making it so that way you have memory to do things, like dropping an extra Shodo down or something, or even getting an Analog Youth down. So not finding it really early on in those matchups, I think, causes our win rate to go down pretty drastically. Finally, into the round 7 or round 8, I'm not sure. There may be a round I'm forgetting about, which is fine. We end up going into Magnamon, blue base pure, which is, I think, probably one of our worst matchups. It's up there with like Mirage. Mirage and Magna are, I think, 2 worst matchups because they can consistently play cards like Zudomon for Mirage, or for Magna, the structure deck blue-black Magnamon is the most devastating card in the matchup. They also get to run things like Heaven's Judgment, which also is devastating. It's why Enga is kind of a rough matchup sometimes, so you don't find Shotos. So we end up playing, and my opponent's playing really slow, which frustrates me. And at this point in the tournament, we've been playing for about 8 hours, like 7.5 hours at this point. My body's failing me. I'm sick. I'm tired. I'm irritated. I'm getting frustrated by the slow pace of play. And game 1 goes for about 40 minutes, which is, for me, insane, because I was never in a winning position. I was always in a losing position, but they just never took the kill. And they're like, sorry, man, I'm just tired too. And I'm like, that's fair. That's fair. And I asked them to play like a little bit quicker. And then game 2 comes around. In the last 10 minutes, we are just not getting anywhere. And am just fighting for my life. We are trying our hardest to go through, and then we go negative 5 minutes into time on their turn 2. So it was 0, it was 0, 1, 2 on their turn 2, and so I couldn't get my turn 3, and we ended up going into time. So it was 1, 0, 0, and they end up just taking it because of the time. And it's like fine. I don't think I was gonna win anyways. I was in a really rough position no matter what, but it just felt bad. And at this point in the tournament, I'd already taken like a 20-minute break because I had lost to Anga so quickly. I ended up going to lay down and try and sleep for a little bit because I was so exhausted. My streamer asked me, they're like, go lay down, de-stress. And I'm like, yeah, you guys are right. Very smart, very smart, very smart. But even though I think the ending was rough for me, I think it comes down to endurance and being ill. I think I could have taken the deck a lot farther. The misplay round 1 against Demons to go to tie, horrible, shouldn't have happened. The loss to Ancient Garurumon, I think, is just variance. And there's not much I could have done about it. Against the Dex deck, I think I could have probably mulliganed a bit more appropriately and understood how important Shoto was after that game 2. And then against the Magna loss, I mean, realistically, I shouldn't have been there. I'm going to run into decks like Magna, like Mirage, and like Ancient Garurumon the more I lose in a tournament. So I just shouldn't be losing. And if I hadn't lost, I would have run into things, more decks like Demon Lords, more decks like Imperial, more decks like Dexter-Rugumon, which are the decks I think I'm more prepared to beat. They're everything that I have planned the strategy around. I haven't looked at the outcome, like the top 8, the top 16 of the tournament. I'm sure if I look right now, which I'll do. Okay, so looking at the top 16, it's a lot of decks that I really expected, and some decks I didn't expect. So like obviously a lot of Demon Lord taking first, taking third, not surprised. Galaxy Toolbox taking second is a huge surprise, but I'm not surprised it lost to Demon Lords, which is I think a really rough matchup for it. Dragon Links taking fourth is crazy. That's crazy to me. That's insane. I don't know how that happened, but respect. And then 2 Ancient Garurumon red bases and Imperial and Yellow Vaccine Armor taking the rest of the top 8 is not too surprising. I am surprised there was a lot more Ancient Garurumon in top 8 than I expected. There were 3 in the top 16. And then the remaining are 4 Imperial Dramon, 2 Levia, a Fenrir Lugamon, not Takumi Kazuchi, which is another surprising thing, and then a Mother Control, which I was expecting a lot more Mother Control, not necessarily in the top 16, but the tournament, and I ended up running into 1 Mother Control. There was a Mother Control list I ended up facing. Somewhere in the tournament, I ended up facing a Mother Control list for the round 8. Anyways, this is the list I ended up taking to the regional, and I'm pretty happy with it. Just going over the generic stuff, I think the bottom end is pretty about average. You need Mephisto monitored matchups, you need Edda monitored matchups, and then your searchers. You've got your Demon Lord, you got your Dark Masters at the ratios you want them at. 4, 4, 2, 1. You play 1 puppet because you really need a way to answer a Gurumon off the Mephisto, and he's the best way to answer him because he bottom decks him, which feels fantastic. Only 2. If I could, I kind of want to put an extra slot in for like a 3rd Metal Siege Dramon because it really makes your Imperial Dramon Paladin mode ace really strong, giving it blocker. But nonetheless, I think it's still completely fine at 2. 4 Vike, the best ace you can be running, 2 and 2, they definitely come up a lot. This ace, I thought about maybe bumping down a number because I really do miss Valkyrie ace, purely because sometimes the deck will just go wide and I have no way to punish them. Dealing with a wide board is not something this deck can do without Valkyrie ace. 2 Melga, 1 for 2, for, nothing crazy. 3 Analog and 4 Shoto. Analog is just good for cheap search and setting up your trash, and then Shoto is Shoto. Again, looking at the lists of things that I ended up facing, I don't regret taking out Ultimate Chaosmon. I think he was a completely fine card to take out. I think it's really good, but I think it's really hard to set up in the current meta. And it makes your bad matchups worse, and it only really helps in the matchups you're already winning. So it's just like, whatever. And then Valkyrie Ace. Yeah, I really do want to add a copy of Valkyrie Ace in. Again, maybe even 2 copies of Valkyrie Ace in, just because not having a board clear sometimes is really devastating, really hard to work around. But here's the list. I don't feel comfortable yet making a primer because I think there are still a couple matchups that I'm personally not too sure about. But I think this is the list that I would take to a regional, maybe taking out one of the analogs or Grand Kawagas for a Valkyrie Ace. But other than that, I'm very happy with the way it played. Winning so many rounds, I think when I'm in my peak performance, felt fantastic. Winning against Demon Lords consistently feels great. Winning against a lot of rogue decks that I didn't expect to go against, like Terrier, like Dragon Lynx, very, very solid. I like it a lot, and I'm excited to either take it again or see where my heart decides the next list I should be practicing on is.